NADP is a national program that started almost 40 years ago. And its beginnings were with the agricultural experiment stations around the country, land-grant universities like the University of Illinois or Purdue or Cornell, or each state has at least one land-grant institution. And at that time, the farmers or ag scientists were interested in what potential effects acidic rain, acidic deposition, might have on crops, in particular crop yields. They were concerned about all kinds of crops all across the country. In addition, the Department of Agriculture includes the U.S. Forest Service. And at that time, of course, it was already reported that acidic deposition had had some harmful effects on certain species of trees, particularly trees vulnerable at high elevations, but sugar maples as well in the northern United States and in southern Canada. So for those reasons, the USDA and the Ag Experiment Stations took the lead to establish a program which, once it was established, because there are ag schools all across the country, was pretty much nationwide. It had a focus. The interest was largely in the Northeast and northeastern United States at first, but it rapidly spread elsewhere. And other federal agencies then, and state agencies, began to have an interest in what damage acidic deposition might have on their natural resources and later their cultural resources, meaning buildings and so forth, statues. So the program grew. It started small, and it kept growing with the increase in interest among state agencies. Indian tribes were interested as well. But federal agencies jumped in a big way as time went along. The U.S. Geological Survey, the National Park Service, I've already mentioned the Forest Service and Agriculture, Bureau of Land Management. In any case, it grew in interest, and as it grew, the resources grew, and the program became a rather well-established program to focus on acidic deposition, where it was occurring, trying to understand the relationship between the sources of acidic chemicals in the atmosphere and where they were being deposited, and whether there could be any intervention or something of that sort to reduce the potential impacts of acidic deposition on the natural resources in the United States. When I came here, we started using computer programs right off the bat. Gary Stenslin was the head of the laboratory at the time, and he hired me fresh out of graduate school, and he had developed computer programs to take the data in and do some of these quality assurance checks that I mentioned. And it was with a box of cards. So it was with a box of computer cards and feeding them into a card reader and running the data through a computer program that was run on an IBM 360. And so that's how we handled the data in terms of looking at how the data looked across the country, or spatially, in other words, or geographically. That was all done by hand. So the computer would do these calculations and tell us what the average concentration was at one of these stations around the country. But we would then, if we wanted to see how that pattern looked across the country, we'd hand plot those values and draw lines on the maps to show ISO lines to show where the pH was lowest, the sulfate was highest, the nitrate was highest, where the ammonium was highest, and so forth. So that's how we did it, by hand. The program was receiving support from, as I mentioned earlier, from a wide variety of interests. Interests in forests, interested in fish and water, interest in soils. And that drew in, and interested in cultural resources and so forth, and that drew in a broad base of support. That's unique. Another thing that makes it unique really started from the very beginning, because The water survey took which at the time you could think of as a contract laboratory, took a very active role in the quality of the data and ensuring that the samples were collected properly right from the get-go, from the time the containers were cleaned centrally here and sent to the site operators to ensure that the containers maintained that cleanliness, to ensure that the site operators handled them properly. And so we had training courses here about that, and to ensure that the integrity of the sample was maintained throughout the process. That doesn't happen for the most part. Most contract laboratories get a bottle of water or a container of water and analyze it and have little or nothing to do with how that sample was collected, how it was handled prior to the time it arrived at the laboratory. People know about NADP. It's a widely known, well-respected program that is held in high regard by scientists, policymakers, and educators alike.